Welcome back to Romance and Rosé, where we don't just read a lot of romance, we listen to a lot of romance. I am an audiobook girly, and I freaked out. A few months back when the official Audible account on TikTok started following me back. They don't actually follow a ton of accounts on TikTok, so it's felt kind of like an honor. And then they ended up emailing me saying, we love your content, here's a free audiobook. So the audiobook specifically that they sent me was Obedience by Liza Snow. I went into this audiobook pretty blind. I didn't know much about the plot. The only things that kind of hooked me from the brief bits of the synopsis that I read was that it was going to be kind of circusy because she was a silk aerialist, and it was also going to be age gap because she went to the circus when she was a little kid and was inspired by the male silk aerialist that they had. And so she's kind of always had a crush on him. And the audiobook is full cast. It was dual POV, but also duet style. So he was still performing all of his lines in her chapters and she was still performing all of hers. And then they also had side characters that had their own narrators. There were sound effects, background noises. It was truly like an Audible experience. The complete cast of narrators were Rapunzel, Daniel Zbiel, Isabel Salzar, Lisa Graham, and Pippa Ryder, all of whom are narrators that I have never listened to before. And it was just a pleasure. I felt like they all did a fantastic job in their performance. I also want to preface this spoiler-filled review by saying, how dare you, Audible, give me a book that is not a standalone, okay? This left on a cliffhanger, and it is part of a series. I don't even know how many books are supposed to be in this series, but I do know that they don't have the audio out for book 2 yet, so rude. So our two main characters are Cassandra and Chandler. It is so rare for me to read a book where Cassandra is the name of the female lead. I feel like it's a more common side character name for me to read about, but I have not read many where that's the main character's name, especially when listening to spicy audiobooks during the spicy time. It was kind of weird, but I liked it. One thing I will say that will not bother anyone but me, probably, is that I'm very specific with people that my name is Cassandra, not Cassandra, and not Cassie. Nothing wrong with those. It's just not my name. But in this book, his chapters, he always very clearly calls her Cassandra. But then from her chapters, she would always say Cassandra. But then there was this one scene where he called her by her nickname and she corrected him, it's Cassandra. And I'm like, but you've been calling yourself Cassandra at the beginning of all your chapters. Which one is it? And a lot of people who go by Cassandra don't care. I think I'm just, I don't know, a pretentious hoe. And I care. Like, I won't be a bitch about it, but if people ask, I will correct them and say, it's Cassandra. Now that we're well into this review, are you gonna start telling the people what it was about, Cassandra? Maybe? Okay, here's what happened. When Cassandra was about 7 years old, her parents took her to the circus. Now, her parents were magicians, I believe, and she saw the performance. She saw Chandler do his performance. She was just in awe and decided that is what I want to do when I grow up. Her parents did end up dying tragically, and all these years later she has studied aerial silks and is now applying to get into this sort of circusy academy of sorts that Chandler's family kind of helps run. Chandler's dad runs this program, but he teaches at this academy, as well as his ex-wife, who, drama alert, had an affair with his best friend, and then the day that they finalized their divorce paper, married his best friend because she was pregnant with his baby. What? So his dad has requested that he be at the auditions for this program, and that's where he sees Cassandra doing her performance, is just in awe by her talent. instantly takes on a sort of mentor role, and she gets accepted into the program. She was also supposed to be TAing for a like circus history class that his ex-wife was supposed to be teaching, but right before school started, she basically said, peace, I'm not coming to classes, I'm not gonna be teaching. And his dad ended up assigning him to teach all of his ex-wife's classes, so now she's his TA. And he's a total asshole to her at first. She's like, wait, why was he so nice at my audition? And now she was like 5 minutes late for her first class because it's a new school. She was confused about where she was. She was running behind. Who isn't? And there should be grace for the first day, but he just kind of like doubled down and was rude to her right away. And I love that she was fiery and didn't just take it. During her first week of school, she makes some friends and they decide they want to hit up this club that is kind of downtown. I can't even remember the name of the club, but it's on one side a bar and on one side a sex club, and it's owned by none other than Chandler, okay? And he is a shibari expert and instructor. And everyone who comes to this club, I guess, has to like wear masks. So she's there, she's in her little mask, he's in his mask, and he puts on this like fake French accent for all of his demonstrations. And he calls her up on stage to be his partner in the demonstration. And the tension is tensioning, the chemistry between them. And she, as soon as he actually starts working on his ropes, he drops his accent and he whispers in her ear to like calm her down because he can tell she's nervous, and she knows it's him. She knows it's him right away. Later that week at school, she is signed up to have like private training with him in the silks. And she kind of lets slip that it was her on stage because she says something that he had whispered to her when they were on stage together at the club. And he kind of backtracks and goes, it was you. Spoiler alert. This whole thing is a spoiler, but he knew it was her. In his heart of hearts, he didn't want to accept that he knew it was her, but he did. He was into it. He was into her, and he just wanted to let himself have that moment. But now that it's out there, he has to acknowledge that it was wrong, that she's his student, that it can't happen again. She can't come back to the club, blah, blah, blah. So for a lot of this book, it's like him sort of fighting his attraction for her, trying to keep her at arm's length, especially because there's a bunch of family stuff and background mysteries that are happening, because this is also kind of like mafia-like. Cassandra is convinced that her uncle is the reason that her parents are dead, and she has kind of been in hiding and on the run from him. He's in prison, but there's not enough evidence to keep him there, and so she's always kind of living in fear and has this special backpack where she's been collecting evidence, and she keeps it with her at all times. And everything that she has collected from private investigators, research she's done on her own, is here, that she, once she feels like she has enough, will hopefully be able to hand over to the police to put her uncle away forever. The closer that Cassandra and Chandler get together, she starts to open up about her uncle, and he kind of gets in on offering up his private investigator to help her figure things out. Even though Chandler's family is into some shady shit, he always seems to be a little either ignorant to it, or maybe we just don't know how much he knows yet. I felt like throughout this book, he seemed to know that his family, in particular his father, was capable of really awful things, but he always seemed to be surprised by the awful things that his family would do. One day they're hanging out in the silks, having a little moment, and he offers to take her back to his place to do a more in-depth but non-sexual demonstration about the artistry behind shibari, what appeals to him about the art. And she does. She goes back to his place, they go to his playroom, and he does all of his sexy little knots. It's hot. Nothing actually happens. The teasing in this, I felt like I was edged almost the whole book. The spice is spicing, by the way, when it happens. You hear panting in the background, grunting, like, it's just good. But then one day he's kind of an a-hole to her in class again in front of everybody, and she just decides to say, you know what? Fuck you. And she goes to the dean, which is his dad, and says, I would like to be switched majors. He kind of, in that moment, crushed her dreams in like the profession itself and was like, I'm gonna drop out of school if you don't put me in a different class. So he ends up talking to his son saying, I know you have a thing for her, and if you don't leave her alone, he threatens him and says, it's not gonna look good for you, it's not gonna look good for her. So he says, he's in love with her at this point, by the way. I will stay away from her, whatever. Just please leave her alone, keep her out of whatever you have going on, whatever you have planned. And he spends the next few months doing exactly that. Like, they only see each other when it's absolutely necessary. They don't really communicate, but the teacher she's been put with doesn't really challenge her, isn't really helping her grow as an aerialist. And she can always kind of feel him watching her because he is. He's always in the shadows, creeping in on her sessions, always wanting to make sure that she's safe. I love that. Eventually, though, he can no longer stay away from her, Abby, and they bone. He takes her back to his shibari room, and they have a super hot, steamy session where he ties her up and then he like hangs her from the ceiling and he does all sorts of dirty stuff to her. It was hot. It made me go, we have rope, okay? We have all the supplies. Maybe not for the suspension stuff, but I did tell my husband after reading this. To which he replied with the only acceptable answer, anything for you. So because they're together and he doesn't want his dad to know about it, he ends up kind of plucking her from the school program for a little bit and inviting her to be in their full-on professional circus performance, which is something that students are not allowed to do most of the time. It has not happened in a very, very, very long time, but she auditions. She's, over the course of this book, become friends with a lot of the performers. They were at her audition. They think she's going to be great. I also think I forgot to mention that Chandler, he has a pretty fucked up knee. He has an injury from a long time ago that keeps him from being able to do his performances as confidently as he used to. His ex-wife used to be his silk aerialist partner. There was an incident in a performance that they did years ago where he saved her from a fall, but it ended up injuring him pretty severely in the process, and kind of ending his career in that regard, which is something he's been a little bit bitter about. But whenever he's up there doing his performances, practicing, he gets PTSD from it. And so if there's anything that he's sort of uncomfortable with, or if he slips at all, he instantly gets sucked back into that memory of like seeing his ex-wife falling and him trying to catch her. So they end up starting, Cassandra and Chandler, starting to become partners, training together, and working through a lot of that fear that he has throughout the story. And I really enjoyed seeing that trust and that bond built between them, especially when their love for each other is so strong. It's one of my favorite things. Like Dancing with the Stars, when the professional dancers end up falling in love with the stars that they're training, I'm just like, I eat it all up. I love the chemistry when you see it in a performance and it translates into real life. The end of this book is where shit starts to hit the fan, okay? His ex-wife and his ex-best friend, they just had their baby. He gets a call from her saying, you gotta come to my house right now, which is weird because she never asks him for anything. He shows up and there's a dead body. She's got stab wounds, blood all over her. And it turns out that that was one thing that broke up their marriage, was that his family was so shady and her family took the brunt of a lot of that, and it ripped them apart. And she always hated his family because of it. And the dominoes are still falling and it's still affecting her life. And she thinks that they came after her and her family to get to him as like a warning or whatever. So he helps her and her husband dispose of the body, immediately gets a call saying, the circus theater is on fire. And the people that he had assigned to kind of have eyes on Cassandra while he was away helping with this other situation ended up having to leave her alone. So he calls her and says, don't leave that motherfucking house because I love you so much and I won't be able to deal with this situation if I'm worried about something happening to you. So she agrees to stay put. but then someone comes after her and almost kills her and her friends. They end up escaping, but it's clear that someone's after her, so she ends up in the aftermath of that situation deciding to flee to France without telling him to keep him and her friends safe. I mean, homie's just out here trying to survive, okay? And apparently that's not an easy task for her. So she's been in France trying to figure out how to find a job. She's also doing her circus work there, and then he follows her, and the book kind of ends with them boning in the silks, and then him being really upset with her and saying, no more keeping secrets from me. Let's lay it all on the table, because there's just a lot of blanks that she needs to fill because information has been kept and he doesn't know the full picture. And he's kind of been living ignorantly, but it's his fault, okay? His family is involved in some shady stuff and he has just kind of kept his eyes closed to it. I don't know if on purpose, but maybe just hasn't wanted to accept it or allow himself to understand it fully. And now he's diving right in because he's in love with this girl and he's got to keep her safe. And to do that, he needs to have all the information. So I'm very excited for book 2. I don't even know when it comes out on audio. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel and hit that little notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my other spoiler-filled reviews or delightful bookish content. Happy reading and listening.